Yeah, that looked painful, didn't it?
Yeah.
It's been about 2 months, and you would think
Oh
it would
no.
go away.
Yeah. I had the worst flu I ever had this year because I was exhausted from moving and I spent 2 weeks down and that just never happens to me. Just
Yeah.
oof.
In 20, 25, 21 years of teaching, and this has been probably one of the worst years just for, yeah, the
Mm.
cold. And
Yeah.
I work with petri dishes, so you would think.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, they gave me a gavel, so I guess I better use it. We're going to call the meeting to order. And I just want to start out the meeting and say wonderful things about the Astoria unit and the fabulous tour that SFAC had down there. They're doing a great job. Dan Goody, Derek Bangs, Cullen Bangs, they showed us wonderful management and management that can move into the future. Oh, and the beaver dams and how effective those are. It was really great. I just want to thank everybody in the Astoria district, and I think all of the SFAC folks truly appreciate it. Nick was there with us. Were you weren't there? I guess Nick was the only one here that was with us. I can't see all who's online, but it was a great tour. So I just want everybody to know that. All right, we're going to do introductions. So we'll start in the room. I'm Margaret Magruder, and I have the pleasure of sitting by the Lynn County Commissioner.
Will Tucker, you're so sweet.
Oh, Mr. Buffo.
Mike Buffo, Director of Technical Services with Mason, Bruce, and Gerard.
Mike Wilson, State Forest Division Chief, ODF.
Nick Palazzano, Deputy Chief ODF, State Forest.
Todd Herron, I'm the Information Unit Manager for State Forest.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Hulshbach. I serve as the Interim Deputy State Forester here at the Department of Forestry.
We get the desk here? Yeah.
Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst for the State Forest Division.
And Crystal Bader, Executive Support.
We have an audience in the room.
Chelsea Peters, I'll be acting District Forester in North Cascade come July 1st.
Wonderful, welcome. So, okay, we're gonna go online. I'm looking at the list there. Do you want to start out, Justin? Oh, you're Justin here. Chair Kelly.
Good morning, Jim Kelly, Chair of the Board of Forestry.
All right, Jerry Willie, are you there? You are.
Margaret, Jerry Willie, Washington County District 4 Commissioner.
Brandon and Miles.
Brandon Persinger, Association of Oregon Counties, home with a sick baby today. My apologies for not being in person.
Well, you're where you need to be. You take care of that young man. David.
Good morning, Chair Margaret and Chair Jim Kelly. David Lovell, Lane County. Welcome to be here. Happy to be here, rather.
And Commissioner Bangs.
Courtney Bangs, Clatsop County. Happy to be here. Thank you.
And Chair Aaron Scar.
Good morning.
President, whatever we call you.
I'm the chair here. There's too many hats. So Aaron Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner. And while I am happy to be here, the sun is shining outside. It's a little hard.
So where are you, Aaron?
I'm in Hawaii.
Oh.
With this dedication, right? I'm going to spend my morning with you instead of out sitting in the sun.
David, did you see David? He's doing the hula. That was great. Is there anybody else online? Must not be. All right. And we will start then with public comments. Is there anybody from the public other than the Board of Forestry Chair and the State Forester that want to comment? We don't really have any public here, do we?
For anyone online, if you'd like to submit public comment, just go ahead and use the raise hand feature and we'll get you in the queue. Also, Madam Chair, there was no comment submitted to the email box.
And there's nobody on a telephone? Is there?
We have some people in the attendees there, but.
Oh, okay. All right, then we will move on. Chair Kelly, you are on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Couple of comments on different things, but one is I think you're probably all aware that we've had media articles related to timber sales. And I'll tell you, from my point of view and getting interviewed, it is frustrating because I just, keep trying to explain the role or the lack of role of the Board of Forestry and the fact that the state forester is in charge and we are by statute not in charge of timber sales. But I keep getting questions like, well, do you know why that's whatever sale was put on hold? And it's interesting because I said there's no reporting to the Board of Forestry on timber sales issues, whether something was happening or not happening, because that's not the role that we have. Anyhow, it's I guess hard to understand. As a public body, we do when citizens come to us, we need to listen and I think the only role we really have is as a bully pulpit. If we see what appears to be the agency doing something that they could be doing better, we have in the past said, geez, can't you guys do something a little bit different? But we're not in charge of that, other than hiring and firing the state forester, we're not. So it hasn't been a lot of fun to be in the crosshairs on that for something that we're really not able to manage. The other thing I wanted to comment on is, having had a chance to look at the modeling, I'm pretty excited. I think, first of all, you look at a project like that kind of modeling over that many years, and then upon review, realize, geez, everything that's being said here kind of makes sense. And, that's sort of the basic thing that you are hoping will be true. And I think this modeling, I think they have done a good job. And at first glance, it seems to make a lot of sense. The other thing that I'm thrilled about is that in all of their years of controversy about the Habitat Conservation Plan, a lot of folks thought there were going to be way less timber being harvested, and my gut was that it wasn't going to be nearly as bad as many people thought. And I think this modeling is confirming that that's true. So I see a real win-win as we get this completed, because we're going to have a lot less reduction in harvest than what people were so concerned about. And we got to reflect, why are we doing this? So that we have protection from all the lawsuits. So, the salmon lawsuit goes away and we don't have to be worrying about a judge running the state forest in future years. So that's a big deal. So we got a lot of details to look at in terms of where to go from here, but I'm excited to be at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. All right, now we have the state forester, but who gets to be the state forester today? Is Kate? Oh, you get to be the state forester today. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking around for Kate.
Nope.
Thank you.
Today I get to be an acting interim.
Yes,
Or-
yes.
but-
Yeah, all of these terms have been a little confusing for those of us on the outside. Yeah.
So I concur with Jim's comments from this morning. I was excited to see the modeling and really looking forward to the time spent and the in-depth conversation today for that. So I'm not going to take up any time delaying us getting to that discussion, and appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you. All right, that moves us right along to the update on ODF engagement process for neighboring landowners. Is that you, Mr. Wilson?
That will be me. So
Perfect.
thanks again for the record, Mike Wilson, State Forest Division Chief. I want to start out with this update and just state, I'm not going to belabor this here today. I will say I was very displeased with the article that appeared. It was not reflective of at least the interview that I gave. And so I'm not saying I was misquoted. However, there was a lot of cherry picking going on there. And so anyway, displeased. And I want to say that, you know, I believe the report provided to the Board of Forestry by State Forester Skinner demonstrates that not only did we have a lot of engagement going on, but that we made adjustments to the sale. We responded with actual tangible things to address concerns of landowners. I think the district did a great job there. So as we go through these improvements, I think, you know, there's a piece here in how we engage at the local level. I think all of our districts do a good job. But when we get down to, you'll see some things here. These are sort of large process pieces. When it gets down to the district and the local level, they're all doing a good job, but we have different districts and they all have a little bit different flavor on how they handle the face-to-face and the handshake and all that kind of stuff. None of it's bad. It's all good. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So things that we're doing that we've always done, that we've done for quite a while now for our AOP notifications. We've always had statewide news releases and media releases. We have notification through our website, through Gov Delivery, that listserv, through social media. We've had emails to citizens and stakeholders that are on our mailing list that they other than Gov Delivery as well, to receive the press releases and upcoming comment periods. We have a web application with access to interactive maps and layers associated with the AOP. You can see right where the sales are. You can click on them and it pulls up a pre-op report. You know, it's very informative. There's a 45-day public comment period with our annual operations plans, which is a relatively long public comment period for any public process, actually. And then we have, you know, a public comment response and a summary of the changes. We do not respond in detail to every comment. We thematically group the comments that we've gotten. Here are the things people are concerned about, and here is our response to that, either a change or no change with an explanation. We review, we're always reviewing the comments and sort of our process to see if we can improve it in subsequent processes as well. So for this year, some things that we've improved, actually not just this year, but we do have engagement with our State Forest Advisory Committee on implementation topics, and you know, you just noted the valuable tour. So we have tours, presentations, and we try to get feedback and perspective from that group. That's a key group for us, representing a broad and diverse range of interests and opinions. And so, and what we also do is we have updated our AOP documents over time as well, just to provide additional clarity or additional information where we see that people commonly have points of confusion. So brand new for fiscal year 26 was the letter notification to all adjacent landowners. And those adjacent landowners are the ones that actually share a property line with us that's adjacent to the operation. And so that includes industrial, small woodland landowners and homeowners. So we try to get it out 1 week prior to public comment. We hope they receive it 1 week prior to public comment. It has basically the letter is twofold. One, it says, hey, you've got an operation coming up in this draft annual operations plan. Don't miss the public comment period that's coming up. That's one thing, making sure that they're aware with links and other things like that. And then having a local contact as well. What it also does is it serves as a piece of education, whereby we kind of explain what the AOP is, okay? And so we've gone through and we're going to have an AOP. That's also not the end of the road. There's this more operational piece once the annual operations plan is approved and the specific operation is being laid out. So they know that there's multiple opportunities to address concerns, right? What we've done, we have improved our website a little bit. We made it a little bit easier to navigate and get to that web map. We've had easier access to the documents that go along with that as well. With our district meetings, we've kind of clarified what we are doing with them is so engagement with folks that call with questions during the comment period. Answering questions as best we can that basically stick to the facts of the operation, right? And also, helping people understand where they can submit comments and so forth. We're not taking their comments for them. There's a bit of a line here. If somebody says, well, I don't like this because of this, we'll say, yeah, well, can you please put that in writing for us? Even if it's in writing and delivering it to the district, right? We don't want to be in the position of having to write and perhaps misrepresent what we heard in that. So some higher level comments and questions that might come from that might get passed onto the planning unit and then through the division. So one of the things that we're going to be doing for the future, for sure, are some informational videos, and this is just a matter of having the time to do them. Sort of like a little bit of AOP 101 videos as well to kind of help people introduce the project. So a little bit of a education piece as well. For our local communications, what we're doing is we're trying to feel this out as we go along, right? It's always a learning process. And we do not have a policy, for instance, to send this letter. That is a process change, right? And that'll stick. We'll keep using that process. In terms of how we deal with people one-on-one, we're putting an extra emphasis on saying, okay, what seems to work and what doesn't. We're also working with partners in forest industry as well. We have met with them and say, what works for you all? Because they deal with the same issue, right? So we are trying to learn so that we can provide perhaps a baseline of like, here's some things we want to make sure we do. Above and beyond is always great, but maybe there's a certain amount of consistency that we have in how we engage at that face-to-face level, just so people know what to expect. And that's all I have on the engagement update.
Thank you. It looks that Commissioner Bangs has her hand raised. Do you have a question, Commissioner Bangs?
Yeah, question, 2 questions and a comment. The first comment is to Commissioner Magruder. Thank you so much for celebrating the efforts of Dan Goody and the Astoria District staff. They've been hammered pretty hard over the last couple months, and to have you speak out in support of their efforts and their transparency means a lot, and I'm sure it means a lot to them. So thank you for that. My next question being is Mothball Hill, the sale that is being discussed in the newspapers and so on and so forth. So that was recently pulled. Is the plan then to put it back? That is a question.
The current plan with Mothball Hill is there is no definite date for when that sale comes back around. We do still intend to proceed with that sale at some point. One of the things that we would like to do in the interim is actually use Davis Ridge, quite frankly, as a really good example of how we can manage and address landowner concerns and work with our landowners how our purchasers work as well. Because I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say, that the purchaser in this case, first thing after the Board of Forestry comments, I called them and said, hey, we're going to have issues here, obviously, and, just want to make sure that we're meeting our objectives together, and that we're working together and that we understand there could be some adjustments. And, the response back was like, no problem. We get it. And they have been wonderful to work with. So anyway, we want to use that sale as a really good example of how concerns can be addressed, and we can still have a very productive timber sale.
I appreciate those statements. I will reiterate my concerns moving forward into the next AOP. Davis Ridge is also in my area, and I have been kind of in an interesting position because what is happening between myself and my frustrations with how the habitat conservation plan was written and how there were no areas of habitat HCAs near the Columbia, and no flexibility to move HCAs around to account for social concerns. Those have been frustrations for me for the last 4 years, and I have shared those frustrations with your staff multiple times and have requested actual movement of HCAs to account for these social concerns. This was part of our listening session in Astoria. So there's that level of frustration there. But there's also a level of understanding of concern because there are abundant social issues in my area. And so I appreciate ODF's effort of communication. But I still inherently am very frustrated with amongst the abundant changes that ODF has made to the habitat conservation plan from the moment we saw it in public till now, that there is no flexibility to move HCAs around to account for social concern. And I feel like Mothball Hill, among other areas, potentially could have been a show of flexibility. I'm not saying add to our HCAs, absolutely not. But I am saying this was one of my main issues of concern. And so as we move into the next AOP, I hope that ODF has the same level of communication with the landowners that neighbor these sales, but also with the representatives in the community. Because when you get blindsided, I get blindsided. The county commission gets blindsided. And then we all get it in the newspaper, and it is not great for community relations. It's not great. And I've had some really good conversations with Chair Kelly regarding my concerns of keeping everybody in the loop and communicate. And he has fully supported that communication, and I appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak for you, Chair Kelly, but let's please keep the communication rolling and keep the counties included. And let's try to make things a little bit more positive moving forward for my constituents, particularly in my area. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make? It's listening to you, Commissioner Bangs, and talking about people calling you up and asking you questions, and we all try and respond, but it's when you're an elected official, especially, you just get a lot of questions and a lot of things that you certainly can answer. And so I'm glad that the Department of Forestry is looking at these things and trying to come up with better methods of communication. My first thought when this all came up was, how long have the landowners that are next to the sales, how long have they owned their property?
Well, it varies. Yeah, varies quite a lot, right? And that's a good point. It's kind of like, do people get certain expectations if they've lived there a long time and they haven't seen anything happen, right? For sure.
Yeah, I always find it interesting if you know, you live next to an exclusive farm use land. Hey, expect some exclusive farm use there. If you live next to forestry land, expect some harvesting there, but I guess I'm a little old school. So I think that Commissioner Tucker wants to respond because I hit his EFU button.
I thank you. Forestry is different because with the rotations that we have, you can be there 50 years and not seeing a forest practice next to you. And I run into, not in my backyard, on all sorts of lands and soil, everything from rural residentials, not wanting a family business in the farms. But in this case, the impact of a person's concerns about the effect to them in their specific little area should not, in my mind, overtake the right thing. And it's hard. We make very hard decisions all the time about eminent domain and actually taking something from somebody. And we rarely do that, but there are times we have to do that because the person won't work with us and we need to put in a traffic circle or stoplight or whatever it may be. And those are hard. I don't like taking away someone's right, but your comment is true. You can be there for a long period of time and see no forest practice, and now the hill you look at is going to be cut and cleaned up, replanted, and in 7 to 10 years, but they're not thinking of that. They're thinking of the fact I've been here for 30 years or 20 years or whatever it's been, and those trees have been so beautiful, and not recognize that that is a crop that is being managed. It's part of the forest that's being managed. And so I've said too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. Do you have any other responses that you would like to make? Anybody else have comments?
Just
Oh,
one.
Tom.
And I just want to reiterate the size of the community that we're talking about. The young woman, the FFA member whose bee project depends on the apiary that is on state forest land. She's a young lady that's in my daughter's FFA. And so when we talk about like community and communication and social concern, this is what we're talking about. Is it's impacting everyone. And so when I am really pushing for that communication aspect, I'm pushing for it not just for us as adults, but also for the children that are dealing with it. Our community is extremely small. Everybody knows everybody. The Astoria district getting hammered. They grew up here. They were babysat by, I'm sure, some of the people that are mad at them right now. And so just circling back to kind of the point that I was getting to, the investigation into the process that our local district followed in regards to the narratives and the newspaper articles, is that investigation going to be released not just here in this public meeting, but also in the next Board of Forestry meeting?
I would have to, this is Tim Hulsbach for the record. I'd have to get back to you on that one, Commissioner Banks. I'm not aware of the answer to that question right at this time.
Okay, I would hope so, just because the concerns were brought to the board, and I feel like the board in public deserves to hear the same answers that we've heard today in regards to how our Astoria district staff handled themselves. So anyhow, I'm in a weird position because I'm defending Astoria district local staff. I'm defending my community. I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place right now. So anyhow, thank you.
Did you want another comment, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, it is a public document. It's available. We can make sure we get it to this committee. And I don't know, I won't put the chair on the spot right now, Chair Kelly, but I don't think there's anything on the current board agenda that is going back to that, but I don't know if that's something that would be done.
You know, Mike, it's never a good idea to try to bury stuff. And there's no reason to in this case. So I assume that that we will post it to the board's website. If I don't forget, I can mention that in my opening comments at the board meeting. But that would be what seems logical and necessary in this case.
Thank you. It appears to me that this issue has, everyone is well aware of it and understands that we need to address it. And as elected officials in small communities, I'm very aware of the community that Commissioner Bangs works in. I live right next door to it. I go to the Napa School auction and my son is the auctioneer. So, but as elected officials, we just, we deal with a lot of things that we have to balance, because you got your, as Commissioner Banks said, you got your best friend that you've known forever that is complaining, and it's part of what you sign on for when you become elected to do commission jobs. So we're supportive of you, Commissioner Banks, and we're certainly supportive of the board of forestry and the staff, and we'll help you in any way we can to keep everything on an even keel. All right. So now we move on to the review of the proposed forest modeling outcomes for the draft forest management plan. Mike, you start that out?
I think I will.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So this, all I'm really doing is introducing this here, but I think everybody remember, we've been walking through this process. Some scenarios were put together jointly by this body and the Board of Forestry, and then the Board of Forestry, went back and approved various scenarios for us to model. As we move through here, I'm going to say I think I'm really pleased with the outcome in that there is a discernible delta, a discernible difference among these scenarios, not only in terms of total cumulative outcomes, but really more importantly, I think a good look at the temporal pace of these things as well. I believe that all the outcomes really from any of these scenarios are positive. And so it really just is, it's a matter of thinking. I think we'll all have to put our thinking caps on in June and be prepared for that, so that we can really focus in on how we might consider things around even flow versus volatility, different outcomes on the landscape, like if we're talking about carbon, it's like, well, if all of them are carbon positive, do we want additional lift for some reason or another? I mean, these are all the discussions that you all can have with the Board of Forestry. So I think it's going to be a rich discussion for us to have. Go ahead. So I just went over some of that stuff there, but basically the real question here is the HCP is consistent throughout the scenarios, remember. So what's really possible in the general stewardship areas outside of HCAs and RCAs. This goes back to the December 23. Todd will talk a little bit about what's the same and what may be a little bit different from the 2023 scenario modeling. But that modeling was important because it kind of came out with this 185 million board foot number that everybody has kind of circled around for different processes. And so, we'll look at the relevance of that number in comparison to these scenarios that are on the graphs as well. We'll have this discussion of the performance measures here coming up on June. We'll have a discussion about the trade-offs in June 2024. And then in September, there'll be further discussions with the board in terms of like, okay, we've had this discussion about trade-offs with FTLAC. Where do you want to land on some performance metrics that guide us into implementation of this forest management plan to develop that first IP? They're not going to have everything. You know that not everything is in here. It's going to take a long time to develop some of the performance measures, especially the social performance measures, but there's enough here. There's enough here to get us started if we, keep the eye on the big rocks that we're talking about. All right, and with that, I am going to turn it over to Todd, and he's going to get into the weeds.
Right. Thank you. Again, my name is Todd Heron. I'm the Information Unit Manager for State Forests. And I'm going to run through a series of slides here that we've prepared to give you an overview of the modeling results. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge that, my secondary hat is the modeler, but I'm also supported by, a team. Tyson Weprich is in my unit, and Jody Kroon does a lot to support the process. So thanks to them and everybody else that participated. So real quick, as you may recall, we at the board meeting in, was it November? We arrived at some scenarios to help explore the breadth of the trade-offs associated with managing the lands primarily outside of the HCAs, right? And so together we arrived at these 4 high level scenarios, we call them. And then within each one of those scenarios, there was a range of options, if you will. And so that's the columns run A, B, and C. So the first scenario 1, was the scenario that was intended to target specific harvest volumes for the first 30 years, primarily off of Board of Forestry lands. The intent there was to just demonstrate non-declining harvest at a specific level for that period of time, and then evaluate what happens after that. And so the model was allowed to reset to a non-declining harvest scenario after that. Scenario 2, the intent was to explore options for longer rotation management and the impacts associated with that relative to harvest and habitat and other outcomes. And we have 2 runs. One guided the model towards 120-year rotations, and then the second one, 150-year rotations. And the goal there was to get as close to that rotation target by the end of the 70-year HCP term. Scenario 3 was intended to maximize total volume over the duration of the modeling term. So over the entire 150 years, let the model generate as much volume as it could across the landscape. And then the first run allowed essentially an unregulated variation in periodic harvest, and then run B constrained that to a 10% variation between any 2 5-year time periods. And then finally, scenario 4 looked at maximizing the net present value of the revenue derived from the lands using a 4% discount rate. And again, run A allowed the harvest volume to fluctuate periodically without any limits. And then run B and C imposed a 10% and a 30% periodic volume limitation. Let's see. So back in November, we thought, well, okay, this is a lot of runs to do. And it was, however, we were ultimately able to get through all of them. We did have some delays. That wasn't necessarily due to doing those additional runs. It had to do with the technical difficulties with the software that we use. Okay, so backing up as a reminder, we're using the same model, the same inputs, the same growth and yield that were used in the modeling that we reported in December of 2023. And so this includes our stand level inventory with depletions up through 2020. It's the same HCA management. So one of the key differences, if you recall from the 2023 modeling, the HCA management varied among those scenarios. And so one of the things we were able to do with this was to implement the management strategies within the model specifically for the HCAs, and then fix those across all of the scenarios and all the runs. So the management within the across all the scenarios, the management within the HCAs is the same for all of the runs. And that's just to kind of hold that piece constant. As is evident by the outcomes, there's a lot more leeway, a lot more fluctuation allowed in the periodic harvest, and that was primarily to get at the concern that the even flow was overly restrictive from the previous models. Do you want to?
If you're at a point where you can take a question, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I should have said that early. Feel free to jump in.
Does that
Commissioner
mean?
Bates?
Yeah, okay. It was an HCA question. So it was the management scenario for the HCA, the 1,500 thinning and the 1,000 clear cut.
Yes, yeah. It didn't get to all of those targets specifically, but as close as we could within the.
Okay, I was just curious because we have yet to see anything near those numbers, and so I was wondering what was put into the scenario. So thank you.
Okay, let's see. Another key difference is the what we call the ending inventory constraint or ending inventory goals. In the previous model, or in the previous model runs, I should say, we allowed the ending inventory to vary based on the harvest that occurred over the modeling time period. And with these scenarios, we changed that up. There are two runs that I'll talk about that didn't have ending inventory constraints per se, and then two that did. All these runs are at the georegion scale. With the slight exception, the 30-year even flow scenario had a district periodic flow constraint to help minimize the local deviations there. And then finally, with all of this, we added some additional financial accounting that we didn't have back in 2023. So this included more road construction costs, what we call in-unit spur costs, and then better accounting for the net revenue over time. Okay, like I said, the intent here was primarily to explore the harvest flow and the outcomes that could be seen from the general stewardship areas. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so some of the outcomes that we're going to present today are the harvest flow and as well as the revenue over time. We'll talk a little bit about the management approach that varies among the scenarios. We'll touch on some of the habitat outcomes for the covered species in the HCP and forest age structures over time. And then a little bit about carbon and I don't think we're going to talk about the municipal water, but we can talk about that. Okay, so real quick on all of these slides, the axis is a little bit funky, but the lines all start at 2025 and go through the full. Some of them are truncated, but generally the full 150 years for the model. The HCP term is roughly in the middle of the charts, so about 2095 would be the 70-year ending point for the HCP.
And in all of these, between the harvest and the inventory, or the harvest and the inventory, the model is essentially capturing all the volume, all the growth that's capable across the landscape. So that's evident in some ways in the variation among the scenarios. So let's see. Courtney, do you want to jump in real quick?
So we've talked about inaccuracy of long-term models. At what point do we not depend on the accuracy of these models? Is it after the 70 years? Is it like because we've talked about long models losing accuracy because of how the forest works. And so at what point should we just like not look at it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I wish I had a solid answer for that. It is very subjective in a lot of ways. One perspective I might offer is that somebody told me the other day that the stands we have on the landscape are going to be there, right, for the foreseeable future. And so we have a good idea. We have a pretty good idea of what's standing on the landscape. When it gets a little bit fuzzier is when we factor in growth and the effects of future harvest and uncertainties.
And are these models off of the previous inventory or your newest inventory?
We're still using the previous stand level inventory. We did in the report, we did give a brief comparison with the new enhanced forest inventory that we've been working on. And they're comparable.
I'm happy to add it a little bit if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that, so it's off, you just mentioned your inventory. This is also off your calibrated yields. And you'll recall that Mason Gerard was involved in some calibration on this. In terms of how to think about the future on these models, I think that, every decade you get out, you have less certainty about what's going to happen. Kind of following up on what Todd said, if you think about harvest levels or really any of the metrics for this first period, the first 5 years, the trees that are involved in, in the metrics for those first 5 years are, they've grown, they've almost grown completely. If they're going to be harvested, they'll be, there's very little additional volume to put on prior to harvest, just looking at harvest levels. And that, of course, changes the farther you get out. There's more growth that has to happen. And then when you're looking at harvest levels out, 100+ years, those trees haven't even been planted yet. So there's certainly more uncertainty about that. But, I wouldn't disregard any of the results here, right? This is the best view that ODF has on, what the future would be. Of course, things are going to happen, disturbances will happen, climate change will happen. That'll affect how, when we come back in 10 years for the next forest management plan and do another set of models, certainly there'll be another set of calibration. We'll get another view of this. So, we're not, the process here doesn't put ODF on any of these lines. It puts us on a performance measure, I think, for the first 10 years. And then there'll be, a review in 10 years, see where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Buffalo. I think that's really good. It puts us on a performance measure, and we're just not going to sit back and watch it all happen. We're going to manage it and learn from our past experiences. Thank you.
Yeah, that was all well said. Thank you for that. And yeah, and to that point, none of these scenarios, well, in all of that, we fully expect that the relative outcomes of these scenarios would certainly be credible. We wouldn't expect the magnitude of the change to be significant.
As I was driving here this morning, I was listening to the radio, and there was a piece on artificial intelligence. They always say AI, and I'm a farm girl, so I think of it in other aspects. But
I am moving my chair over.
But do you foresee artificial intelligence as a future tool to be using on all of your projections?
I don't have a crystal ball. There are aspects of AI that are certainly involved. Some of the components of AI, what's called machine learning, we do in fact use some of that. But what you're seeing in the media today, where maybe that will inform some of this in the future, but certainly possible.
As Nick Palazzano for the record. So yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have machine learning accomplish the tasks that Todd's doing currently on top of his normal duties. If I'm not wrong, Justin can correct me. I don't think the state is allowed to use a lot of the like publicly available open source AIs that exist right now. So that would have to change.
Okay, so back to this slide, just real quick, I'll talk through them a little bit. Scenario one, we'll zoom in on the next slide, but you can kind of see the effects of those three harvest level objectives, and to some degree the effect on the departure, where the higher level harvest up front imposes a slightly more slightly higher level of departure in that after that 30-year time. The long rotation is interesting in that there's a significant amount of harvest up front, and that's largely a factor of related to our current age class distributions. So the model is trying to schedule out the age of stands such that we have a regulated condition by the end of the HCP term. And so it has to do that by harvesting some of those older stands up front. Scenario 3, maximum total volume, it's allowed to ebb and flow. It's essentially, the model is essentially working the best it can to capture all the growth on the forest and harvest the stands at what would tend to be the culmination of mean annual increment, which is the highest level of harvest possible for any given stand. And then scenario 4, maximum net present value, is really, as it suggests, trying to realize as much revenue as possible. And the nature of discounted cash flow imposes that, or suggests that any stands that are at or beyond what would be called their financial maturity, the model would want to harvest those sooner rather than later. And then with all of these, there's a green up constraint imposed on top of that.
Do any of these, I'm not a forester nor a mill owner, but do any of these scenarios give us pause when we think about the future of the milling industry and how we can use these logs? I know that Stimson Lumber and Clatskanie can cut some big logs, but for how long they'll be there, I don't know. And if they're big logs, people can't cut them, and if they're little logs, people can't cut them. So is this all factored in?
It is. The growth model projects out the log sizes, and then we use that to essentially merchandise the logs that the model generates prices for. What it does not do, it doesn't try to constrain the model based on the market or the assumptions about the market. So there is a limitation there. I see Mike ready to chime in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And the future around that is pretty unknown. I mean, when you start looking at the long rotation scenario specifically, you're going to have some larger logs coming off of that, obviously, at the end of rotation. And even in, any potential late mature stand thinning that we currently don't really do, right? Mill infrastructure is one thing. Mills have different capacities. They have, some have deeper pockets than others in terms of retooling, tool up or down, to be able to handle a different product. If we put mills aside for a second, I think a bigger concern in that scenario really are operators. Operators are, they're working on a much thinner margin. These are family businesses. Some mills are too, but, they're smaller. And when you start to get into some of the larger wood, especially if you're talking about an additional thinning instead of a regeneration harvest, you're talking about bigger equipment that a lot of them have already divested from and is very expensive to have made because it's not an off-the-shelf thing. So there's a lot to factor in there, but I think the bigger impact there and the bigger shift that would be more difficult to make would actually be in the operator base versus the mills at the end of the day.
Yes, the operator of that was at the Astoria tour, Adam. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Was talking about how he had to get $1 million pieces of equipment in order to, and wants to be able to use that for the long term.
Margaret, is your microphone on? We're not hearing much.
Oh,
on
yeah,
the
my microphone's on. Nobody's ever told me, Aaron, that they couldn't hear me.
Well, it's unusual, but I would just remind
right.
everyone in the room that when you turn away from your microphone to
I
talk
was
to
I was
somebody at the
turned away
table,
from
we
it.
lose you. Thank you.
Yes, that equipment is very expensive, and we have to hope that these folks can stay in business and be able to continue. Thank you. Commissioner Bangs?
Yeah, I actually got wrapped up into your conversation and trailed down a rabbit hole in my brain. But what percentage of these models have domestic adjacent landowners, would you say?
You mean in terms of the amount of harvest that's occurring adjacent to landowners?
Yeah.
I don't have that number in front of me. We did start to take a look at that. I'll get that for you.
Okay. I mean, I would appreciate it just because we've seen already in the last year what has happened. And so I am desperately trying to trust the modeling scenarios that you are giving me. But I still have trust issues because of the original 225 to the 185 and all of the other modeling scenario concerns that have occurred to the counties up until this point. So I am going to try to withhold too much excitement until I know that I can truly be excited. So thank you.
Nick Palazzotto for the record. So I guess for a little bit of clarity, under each of the scenarios, all the same acres are available. So that like any adjacency issues will occur under each scenario.
Okay.
If that helps.
I mean, it doesn't help just because we've seen what has happened when sales get pulled due to adjacent landowner concerns. And I'm not invalidating the adjacent landowner concerns, but what I'm saying is the counties need to be able to depend on the funding in order to have our social services. And so like we're putting a lot of trust in the department and the Board of Forestry and a lot of trust into everybody to make sure that the numbers get harvested because our jobs depend on it. Our sheriff's department depends on it. I know that, Tillamook County depends on timber dollars, just like Clatsop County does. And things weren't solved at the state level. And so I'm just inputting, yes, I am cautiously positive for the next 2 decades, potentially. But there's a lot of caution in that. And as we've seen this last year, how much and how quickly things can change. Because you just told me that a sale is pulled with no date of return. And if that continues to happen to Clatsop County, that means we lose teachers, we lose sheriffs, so on and so forth.
I think everybody, all of us are quite aware of the financial issues around this. I don't think there's a county who has timber that isn't. And I am seeing it's not just timber counties that are in trouble. It's all counties. And I can't remember what the city of Portland's deficit is, but I felt really good when I heard that. Mr. Buffo, do you have a comment?
Commissioner Magruder, it's actually about this uncertainty and really what this is versus sort of the policy, I would say, uncertainty that remains, where this is a representation of the HCP and the future FMP, the draft FMP, with the, I guess, best information you have about the inventory and the yields. But none of these results are certain, in fact, because there is still the performance measures that need to be created, and then also the implementation plan. Is that right? So the outcome of this, kind of looking at Mike here, the outcome of this is informing the board about performance measures, and then there's still the next step of getting at implementation plan and ultimately AOPs. So we weren't going to come away in September with a number that is implemented on the ground. There's still future planning steps.
Correct, correct. This modeling is meant to inform what's possible under these. And then, you know, even though the board is not selecting at the end of the day a scenario to implement, they're trying to take these data and say, we like, you know, we like these ideas here, or this is how, that helps us inform how to set a threshold or a target or what have you for a particular metric. And that informs the implementation plan. And then, so I think what we have here though is if we end up with metrics that are within the range of these scenarios, that, yeah, we can assuredly design an implementation plan that can hit those at a high level. At the same time, yeah, there's always so there's managing to policy. And then there are these other things that come in, and I think it's important, this is a point of communication, I think, to make it very clear. It's kind of like, well, the Oregon Department of Forestry manages to the policy and legal mandates here that we have, okay, and not, when we respond to something on a social level, it's not a matter of policy, right? That has us do that. That's a political issue. It's an issue that's up there. And so part of the whole communication piece has to be the understanding of like, this stuff's going to happen. And so I think having the number about how many adjacent harvests there are next to a small landowner is a good idea.
Well, and your objective, right, is to manage towards greatest permanent value. And this modeling report has information about different aspects of how the scenarios get towards greatest permanent value. And so I actually really like the staff report. I think it's very thorough and it has a lot of information in that. So I really appreciate this staff report, and that helps kind of identify outcomes of these models, you know, that we can look at and assess against greatest permanent value, or tell you, counties can tell you the opinion towards greatest permanent value. This also isn't the only report, right? There's additional information coming out after this. So you'll have this to look at for some months. And then we'll have another report to look at. Is that?
That's correct. The socioeconomic, because of the little technical glitch with the model that Todd referenced, we weren't able to get this stuff to the contractor in time to get the socioeconomic report as part of the package. So it'll be coming out a month later, early July, and it'll have like direct and indirect jobs and other types of things.
That sounds wonderful. That sounds like it'll be pretty informative and answer some of the questions that we're already asking. We just want everything all at once. Courtney, quick question. You can't take all the time up here.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm just, as a comment, I, as a county, would be really excited to have a runway to pivot, especially when it comes to the economics of what is happening. And so I see one particular model that might provide the counties a runway to pivot economically. We can't pivot in the 1 year, and with the steep drops, but we could potentially economically pivot over 2 decades, 3 decades. And so I would like my other commissioners to contemplate that also, of which model may provide us with that runway, so that we can start moving the giant machine called government, because we know government doesn't move quickly.
Thank you. So which one of those, are you picking one?
Put me on the spot.
Hey.
Hey, I like what number 3 looks like, but I can't commit to it as of yet until I get all of the information, which we've just been told will take a couple months. But it's just visually would provide operators, mills, economics. It would provide a couple decades for job creation and economic creation for communities potentially. I think that we all know that change is coming, and so that's just my particular thought. Me, myself, and I have yet to talk to the rest of my board either. So I'm remaining uncommitted.
Right. Well, thank you. And Commissioner Lovell, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. I agree with Courtney on her position on maximum volume scenario number 3, but I also think that it allows us with an aggressive start to kind of help mitigate some of the fire issues that we're having too. So that's why I kind of like that idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovell. You can
Thank you.
chime right in.
Thank you. Yeah, no, those are good points. And I do want to just point out, since we're kind of talking about it, for us as well, there are implementation issues with these. Just quite clearly, scenario number 4 there, we cannot start out that way as an agency. There's no way we can do it. We're not staffed for that, not remotely. And similarly, to some extent, the long rotation, although that's coming from a different place because of the types of stands it's taking at first. Either number 1 or number 3 for us are logistically feasible. We would want to, especially if we look for number 3, I think it's important that we, as we move through this process, that this presentation, that we really focus on that dashed line with the periodic limit constraint. That allows us to adjust workforce, gives us a more reasonable place to adjust workforce. And we would probably do some additional smoothing to that anyway, right? So it would be, but those 2 are achievable. The other 2 are kind of like, I'm not so sure that really works for us either, workforce wise.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion. I feel like there is a lot in this report to digest. And it feels like we've kind of honed in at this point on that feasibility piece, which is great. I love that there's feasibility in there. One of the things that I would like to see in the analysis of this report, if it's possible, is just sort of a checkbox table that says, is this feasible? Yes, no. Is this meeting the habitat needs? Yes, no. So just as I read through this 77 pages today, this morning, in fact, trying to tease it all apart and say which one of these models for the trade-offs conversation checks the most boxes, knowing that we're not necessarily picking a single model, understanding that the targets may blend some of these, but it's still helpful to think about if to analyze each model kind of in a separate space with an easy visual of yes, yes, no, 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 yes, so that it's easy for the decision makers, which will of course be the Board of Forestry ultimately, but for us providing our input to be able to say, well, yeah, we can kind of throw out number 4 or throw out at least the first 5 years or whatever it is where it is completely impractical and not feasible at all, to know that again in an easy visual way. And we certainly appreciate, as Courtney suggested, and Commissioner Lovell as well, Commissioner Banks, Commissioner Lovell, the opportunity to have time to pivot as local government by having a harvest up front that we can be smart about how we use it, how we save it, and knowing where the changes are coming to the best of our ability. But yeah, it would be nice to have to look at these again, scenario by scenario with, does it meet the habitat needs? Does it meet the revenue needs? Is it feasible? What is the impact on carbon? And just remembering always that the habitat conservation plan meets essentially the needs for our environmental pieces, for our habitat, et cetera, and that we want to be extremely thoughtful about any additional constraints that we put on it that do not directly align with needs of the habitat conservation plan. So I think that might be another checkbox or a final analysis in that, which says, does this model align with the needs of meeting the habitat conservation plan? Does it exceed those, or is it too small for those? So that again, in this trade-offs conversation, we're given just a little bit more analyzed information, if that makes sense, to help us have really good conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Scar. Is that a realistic ask?
Yeah, it is. And I saw Todd making some notes over there. So I think we're gonna get something going. Yep.
We have some examples from prior work that maybe we can draw. Yep. Oh, I think we have some examples from prior work that we can draw on, so maybe we can come up with.
Yeah, because it's all in here. It's just hard to
Yeah,
pull
some
those
of
77 pages, and maybe it's because I was only able to read it on my computer today, but to really go through and have that analysis laid out in a way that is just simple. So thank you.
Commissioner Banks?
Prior to our joint meeting with Board of Forestry, are we able to submit additional questions that can be answered next week or potentially addressed next week? Or the week after next? It's 2 weeks from now? I don't know. I don't know what day it is anymore.
Yeah, that would actually really help. If you have additional questions,
Okay.
send them to us. Yep.
Okay, excellent.
Maybe if Brandon can kind of wrangle the questions.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
send them.
ask Brandon to
Yep,
amass them and.
Happy
Are you
to.
the- Oh, great, Brandon. Thank you. Do you have
And-
any, now that you're talking to us, do you have any comments at this point in time, or does Miles have any?
I do not, and I can guarantee that Miles's would not be helpful at this current juncture in time.
Thank you. I didn't want to leave you out of the conversation, and I certainly didn't want to leave Miles out, because I'm not going to be here to see the end of this, but Miles maybe.
Right. Carry on.
Chair Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as someone who is going to spend a lot of time looking at these presentations repeatedly, it comes with the job, that, really going to encourage you, Mike. I don't like to spend a whole lot of time looking at stuff that will never work in the real world. So as much as you can, as you do these presentations, get that information out quickly, so to everyone, around, the reality of 2 and 4 being completely impractical in the short term. I think that's important, so that all of us can really start focusing on what's actually possible in the real world. Versus that. I mean, it's all very interesting. I think it should be shown so that everybody understands. I think it'll be fascinating for the conservation community to see what the long rotations would mean in the short run. So that all of that's good from an educational point of view, but as we, I'm just going to encourage you to quickly get that out there so that we can all start focusing on where we really will go. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. All right, Todd, we keep interrupting you, so I hope that you're not losing. Is that a new hand you have up, Courtney?
I was just wanting to request the models to be off of our current inventory and not off of the inventory from a couple years ago, or that we could have a line of the current inventory. That way, I mean, to follow up with Chair Kelly's statement, let's use all of the real information that we can, and that way we're more prepared. So that's just what I was going to request. Thank you.
Are you nodding yes, Todd?
Well, maybe we can address that at the board meeting a little bit, the differences there.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll carry on. Got a bunch of slides here, but I'll try to be brief with them. The next one is, I think we belabored this one a moment. So yeah, so the next one is speaks to the inventory over time. So this just gives you an idea of the how the standing, the forest, it doesn't really give you a picture of the forest, but this is represents the inventory on the forest over time. And so the couple interesting points perhaps are that the scenario one carries a little bit more volume than the max, carries a little bit more inventory over time than like scenario three. And one of the factors that plays into that is that even flow constraint. So the model has to carry a certain, just can't harvest in a way that captures all of that inventory over time. So it carries a little bit higher volume over time. So I mentioned earlier that scenario 1 and 3 have an ending inventory goal. The goal there was that at the end of 150 years, the model would arrive at an ending inventory, a harvest level, and an ending inventory that's consistent with a long-term sustained yield calculation. So for each unit on each stand on the landscape, there's a calculation that goes into estimating, the maximum sustained yield, and then that is then used to back calculate the associated inventory. And that's what kind of pegs the ending inventory for scenarios 1 and 3. Scenario 2, because it has an age class distribution imposed on it, didn't require an ending inventory constraint or goal. And then scenario 4, because the objective and the request was to see what the maximum net present value would be, it was allowed to essentially liquidate the remaining merchantable forest at the end of the time horizon. And so that's what that little blip is, the little tail in the charts for scenario 4.
Okay, Todd, if I can jump in again. So I'm sorry, I don't want to slow you down. I realize we're using a lot of time here. This is an important decision space piece for folks to think about. Okay, especially on scenario 4, even if we ignore the blip at the end where the model does its thing, the amount of standing inventory you have equals the amount of decision space you have to increase harvest later on, right? So if you take it down to a certain level, you can't just harvest more. You're not going to be able to do that, right? Any of the other scenarios work okay, but it is important as Todd mentioned there, that maximize total volume, since it doesn't have the even flow constraint that scenario 1 does. Scenario 1, you end up leaving a little bit on the table, so to speak, of what you could harvest, that you are foregoing harvest to meet that even flow constraint versus allowing for the volatility associated with scenario 3. That's all I'll say. Please continue.
Okay, so this slide is really just a zoom in of sorts on these the two scenarios 1 and 3, focusing in on the 70-year time horizon for the HCP. This gives you a little bit more visual representation of the differences between those scenarios in terms of harvest outcomes and the inventory over time. That's about it for this slide. The next one is really just to give you gives everybody an idea of like, well, how does the harvest come in over time in terms of cumulative harvest? And there's a couple interesting pieces here, namely the scenario 4. It's a little bit more evident that like there's a lot of harvest in that scenario up front. And even though scenario 3 was, we called it the maximum total volume scenario, it doesn't in fact generate more harvest volume. A lot of that volume is retained in the inventory because it's trying to manage for that higher level of it's tends to manage towards that culmination age, and so that that's essentially why there's the difference there in the end. And then also the because the net present value run is liquidating the forest at the end, there's additional volume coming off there in terms of cumulative harvest. Let's see. Okay, moving on to average harvest age. So this slide represents the average age of harvest over time. And again, this is average. There's a range that's not evident in all of this, but this is just the average harvest over time. And again, it's as with the inventory, the scenario one is holding on to those stands a little bit longer, so they get a little bit older, trying to meet that even flow constraint. So that's why it's harvesting a little bit older. Scenario three, we tend to think of our maximum rotation age, or our CMAI rotation age, at around 80 or 90 years, and that's bearing out here in this chart as well. And then scenario four, as we'll see in a subsequent slide, it's a little bit limited by some of the in particular the spotted owl dispersal constraint. Otherwise, we probably would have expected that to harvest those stands at a younger age out in time. Financial maturity probably occurs, closer to 40 or 50 years instead of the 60 years that's represented here.
Go.
Thanks, Commissioner. Todd, I had a question on this about what the typical harvest age is today on your regeneration harvest. How do these compare to what's going on right now?
Yeah, I think 1 and 3 are fairly typical of our management, at least in the range of ages that we tend to harvest.
Thanks.
Let's see. Oh, okay. This slide tracks the revenue over time. So this is essentially the net stumpage. So after we've accounted for road construction, hauling, logging costs, it does not account for reforestation in this case. And so largely it tracks with the harvest, right, over time. The model is sensitive to the grade and species that it's predicting, but it's largely tracks the harvest level in terms of the relative outcomes. Okay, so an interesting piece is, so even though scenarios 1, 2, and 3 did not have a financial goal, we're still able to calculate the financial efficiency, if you will, which net present value is used as a measure thereof. Scenario 4, maximize net present value, that was an explicit goal, so it generates a higher level of revenue over time in discounted real terms. The bars on this chart, the blue, the lower bars represent the 70-year time horizon for the HCP, and then the remainder is the orange on the top of the bars. So it just indicates that, because of the nature of discounting, the lion's share of that net present value is represented by that 70-year time frame. Okay, moving on to other outcomes, this habitat across the landscape for covered species. So we have these for spotted owls, marbled murrelets, and red tree voles. We're just showing the spotted owl here, and what this represents is the average habitat quality across the landscape. So not necessarily quantity, but the average quality of the habitat. So within the HCAs, since the management is the same across all the scenarios, the black line represents the habitat outcomes for all those scenarios, and then the other lines just indicate the average quality outside of the HCA's, and that includes RCA's, riparian conservation areas, operationally limited areas, as well as the managed portion of the landscape.
Looks like Commissioner Banks has a question. Do you have?
Yeah,
Answer that, Todd?
so what you're showing here is basically this dispersal habitat then that these different plans provide to on top of what the HCAs provide, correct?
This is indicating so we have what we call habitat suitability indices, which is separate from the dispersal habitat requirement.
Okay.
It's on a separate slice.
So this is noting additional habitat outside of the HCAs and the dispersal requirements. This is habitat on top of all of that then. So it's like an addition problem.
The dispersal.
The next slide, the next slide is actually, I think, the dispersal habitat slide. So that might be where the question comes in best, actually.
I think that'll clear it up. Yes, it's not additional. The dispersal habitat is a component of this habitat suitability index as well.
Okay, maybe when we show it to everyone, we put it all on one slide. Sorry, it's just a little confusing.
Yeah, it looks like Mike might chime in here, but this slide is really about the quality of the habitat across the landscape.
Yeah, it really is about looking at the landscape as a whole. So even though, for instance, you might have some stuff out there, let's look at the endpoints, and orange and green there, they kind of center up on 0.4 outside of HCA's, right? Not a real high habitat score, but you think about the rotation ages in there, they're somewhere 70, 80 years old, that type of thing. They're going to be providing some level of habitat, but at any given time, you've also got a lot of stands in the mix that are recently clear cut. So it's averaging out that whole thing. And so it's just kind of like, what's the general suitability of the landscape? Whereas the, the dispersal capable landscape criteria in and of itself is that we would have a certain amount of that landscape in that dispersal capable position. So this certainly all this stuff here factors into that for sure, but they're ever so slightly different questions, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just look at like our HCAs, look at all of that habitat we have, and then whatever habitat we can get out of the orange or the green is that additional perk. Because I'm just circling back to, in my brain, Commissioner Scar's comments of, this looks like we're doing a wonderful job for the environment, and for the animals. And so, let's try not to layer on additional constraints onto ourselves. So anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, and the next slide I think is about the dispersal habitat. So dispersal habitat effectively is trees that are 11 inches or greater. So stands with trees that are 11 inches or greater and have 40% or greater canopy cover. And that's a specific requirement, or the expectation in the draft HCP is that we maintain 40% across the landscape, 40% outside of the HCA's. So the black line indicates that 40% threshold. So in all of the scenarios, we're able to stay well above that 40% limit. Except that in the max net present scenario 4 is actually limited by that 40% threshold. So if we didn't have that rule in the model, it would gladly dip below that 40%.
Todd, this is Mike. I had a question on this. This says the general stewardship land, so I suppose this does not include RCA's in these lines. Is that correct?
It does, yeah.
And then relative to the commitment question, I'll say some of the higher quality habitat commitments, or the maybe bulk of the total acres of the commitment, are coming from the HCA's, and then expected to come from RCA's, and then in those general stewardship areas, there is this dispersal commitment dispersal habitat's a lower quality habitat. And so basically all of these are designed to meet the commitment, but it looks like scenario 4 is basically constrained by the commitment. Is that right?
By that dispersal
By the dispersal
requirement,
commitment.
right? That 40%, that's 11-inch DBH. Yeah, yes.
So the rest are meeting the dispersal requirement, and they're all meeting the overall habitat objectives of the HCP.
Yeah, yes, 100%. And, we might manage a little bit differently to avoid, like, so this says that under net present value, we would have to carefully track that dispersal habitat requirement, right? Doesn't mean that we would exceed it ever. And we think that that's the primary reason why you're seeing under net present value or rotation age just above 50 rather than down to 40. So, yeah.
Good. All right, we can move on. The next series of slides are about the age class distribution over time. So in all of these, the dark blue represents the portion of the landscape that we can actively manage at any given time. The light blue is constrained, for lack of a better word, for a variety of reasons. It may be operationally limited. It could be the RCAs. Something else is escaping me there, but it's the areas that we're not able to harvest on. And so this across the general stewardship, all of the scenarios start at the same place. So that's what this slide is representing. Of note, you can see that we're starting with a fairly unbalanced age class distribution. There's a lot of stands in that 60 to 80 and beyond age class. Questions?
Does
ahead,
this,
Courtney.
does this include the HCAs also?
This does not. No, these slides are just there's a slide at the end that has the HCAs, but this is just the,
Okay, with the constrained and the operable, you have a slide at the end with the HCAs?
yes, the HCAs
Okay.
separately, but
Well, I guess I just liked seeing the whole picture, up front of what the forest is doing, and being able to put the HCAs on top of the constrained would be nice. Because I feel like that's a full picture. Like, we're doing a giant environmental commitment, and it would be nice to be able to visualize that environmental commitment. Thank you.
okay, the next slide. Okay, so so these just tick through the landscape over time for each. So we're just using run A from each of the scenarios to maximize the use of the screen spacing. So again, by 70 years, a lot of the scenarios are approaching more of a regulated age class distribution. Maximize net present value, given the amount of regeneration harvest that it does up early on, is indicated by that high level of younger stands. Let's see. The next slide is then just jumping forward to the end of the 150-year time horizon for the model. And again, the long rotation scenario had that strict age class regulation imposed upon it. So it's the most regulated, of course, by the end of it. And the other scenarios are in particular the net present value scenario that spike again, the young stands is largely just an artifact of that the model kind of taking the rest of the merchantable volume off the landscape at the end of the model time horizon. And then finally, so what happens with the habitat conservation areas? Again, the operable in this case is meant to indicate, the the stands that we can manage for the first 30 years. That's why there's no dark blue on the subsequent panels. And so those aren't the stands that the model is suggesting we harvest. Those are the stands that we could manage within. And since harvest doesn't occur after 30 years, the age class just progresses through that 180-year age class by the end of the model. Okay, and then finally get to carbon outcomes. So we were able to calculate the harvested wood product storage through time. So this used models, if you will, that were part of a report that was produced for the board a number of years ago that looks at the end use of harvested wood products as well as the life cycle or the lifespan of those products over time, and tries to track the harvest accordingly, the harvested wood products accordingly, and they're eventually positioned. And so that is then added to the carbon estimates for the forest. So we get this total net forest and harvested wood products outcome over time. Yeah, let's see. And then the next slide kind of breaks that apart. Again, on the right, since the habitat conservation areas, the management is all the same. We just have one line representing those outcomes over time. This slide does not include the harvested wood products. It's strictly just the estimate of carbon on the forest over time. So similar to the inventory, carbon tracks a similar course.
Courtney?
I guess I'm just gonna have a similar comment. I don't like splitting our forest up into two parts. I feel like the habitat conservation areas are still part of our forest, and so the graphs should reflect that as an addition problem, if that makes sense. When we separate it out, I feel like we're also separating out all of the positives that the habitat conservation areas are providing. I mean, it's that environmental commitment, and I would just prefer to have all of the information. It's one forest. It's not two separate forests. Like it's the same with how we've talked in the past about, the habitat conservation plan is our environmental commitment. And I feel like they just need to be added together. It's one forest.
Mr. Buffo, do you have a comment there?
Well, yeah, I have a question on whether all the forest is here. Are the riparian conservation areas on either of these two graphs?
They're included in both, yeah. So where they're in the space that they occupy. Yeah.
Thanks.
This is Nick Palazzano for the record. Yeah, Commissioner Banks, thanks for that. We don't disagree, and we've heard similar feedback from board members as they've looked at this. So it's really just thinking about how to present the data versus intent. And certainly the intent is we are looking at the whole forest and what the HCAs provide for those other things. And so don't want that piece lost at all. But just for the purposes of the discussion with the board, remember, the focus is what do we want to do in these areas outside? And so, yeah, the HCAs are providing the vast majority of the lift for these other trade-offs, which I think is helpful for this discussion around volume and value. But the intent there isn't to say it's two forests, it's just to focus in on that area outside of the conservation areas.
Oh, Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. I appreciate both of these comments, both from Commissioner Bangs and from Nick, because I do think one of the things we want to show is that the habitat conservation areas are carrying the weight they're supposed to carry, which is carrying the weight of the HCP in a way that we do not need to add additional constraints to the stewardship portion of the forest in order to meet the goals we've all set forward for ourselves in the habitat conservation plan. So I see that why Nick, you're saying you maybe want to separate these so you can show that and you can say, we committed to this in the HCP as achieved through the habitat conservation areas, and we're meeting that. And showing that in the stewardship areas, they're contributing as they need to as well. So I can see the separation in just how we talk about it, right? The habitat conservation plan is such a key piece of what's driving this work that we're doing and being able to show how we're meeting it in each area. And you know, if after that, then it was a slide that said, and here's the look overall, which I think is what Commissioner Bangs is asking. But I really do agree, you need to start with at some level a separation for clarity so that we know, and everyone who's looking at this and making these decisions knows, yes, we are actually achieving what the Habitat Conservation Plan asked for in the ways it asked for it, so that we don't suddenly feel that, hey, it's not high enough on the stewardship side, right? So again, I see the separation and it would be still an interesting picture for the whole.
Commissioner Tucker.
So I want to make sure that in the general stewardship side of the net forest carbon, that does not include the sales of that processed lumber's carbon. That just so if you were to look at the habitat conservation area, that actually is the carbon and only the carbon that exists from those trees. Whereas in the stewardship area, it's not just that's the carbon that is in the standing forest, but there's also every time you cut down a tree and you're able to make that log and have that tree, that lumber sold and built into something, there's actually an accumulative effect on top of this. And so I have to make sure that someplace that gets mentioned as you present this, because people look at this and say, oh, why aren't we storing more carbon? Well, we are. Every single time we sell a tree, we're storing carbon. And every time we use that versus something else that is eating up carbon, we're producing. So I just want to make sure that as you present this and think about the text you put together for it, I would love to see us have a comment about the fact that this is not the cumulative effect of the stewardship forest contributing not just the stand volume like we do with the habitat conservation area, but also the ongoing sale. And the last thing is today's slides are really great. I'd love those in color. So if you could send me the PowerPoint, I'll be happy to spend the extra to print them in color, because it's hard to look at these in just black and white. I apologize. Thank you.
Yeah, good comments. And so yes, so to the point of, you know, separating versus showing them together, it is, I guess it's just it's a trade-off that we kind of work through. The previous slide does, so when you talk about the harvested component of the wood, that is part of that cumulative effect on the previous slide. But of course, what you can't see here is the contribution from the HCAs. So trying to kind of parse those out and show them separately in different ways is difficult. Whereas this slide, to your point, this one does not include the harvested wood products portion of the carbon. And we went round and round about, you know, different ways to represent all that. I think that, so we maybe have one more slide. Yeah, so just a quick note about the recreational impacts. When we reviewed these models, these outcomes with our internal staff, you know, recognized that the recreational infrastructure is similarly affected by all of the models or all of the scenarios. The harvest that is on the general stewardship area is going to occur eventually on all portions of the forest. So similar impacts over time. And then as we noted, there's more to come on the socioeconomic front. We have a separate report that will be out shortly. I think that ends my portion of the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, do you have comments to follow? Oh, Commissioner Bangs.
I just want to reiterate final slide for the carbon and so on and so forth. I just really dislike the bifurcation of these tables, and it's a whole forest. And so I understand the need to separate things out, but to give a final picture, because I feel like it will help eliminate cherry picking. There's a lot of individuals, especially our news media, that haven't been here for the last 4.5 years, 5 years in these conversations. And so if you can show total pictures without the bifurcation, that would be appreciative. Thank you.
So, yeah, I think what we can do is maybe just change the order of the slides and how we discuss them, because the first slide you showed was entire landscape, correct?
Yeah.
So inclusive of everything. So you can say, here's here's the net picture, and also includes the harvested wood products piece. So there's an order
For
of things.
clarification, the carbon slide had a total?
Yeah, there's two slides. Justin, can you back up? So this one that we presented first is the entire landscape with harvested wood
Including the
products.
HCA's?
Yeah, so I mean, if it helps folks think about it better, we can always just present we can just change the order of slides. and talk
I
about it.
guess I misunderstood the conversation over the last 10 minutes, because I thought we were told that that did not include the HCA's, that it only included the riparian zones.
Apologize for the confusion. This one includes everything on the landscape.
Commissioner Bangs, are you saying like the habitat slide, could we do the same thing for carbon? Is that what you're requesting?
So what I'm requesting is when we're talking about age classes on the landscape, that we also include the age classes of the HCA's because they are part of our forest. When we're talking about carbon storage, that we also include the carbon storage of the HCA's and the riparian zones. That we don't continue to bifurcate and separate our forests, that there is a slide that incorporates it all. I understand the need to separate for conversation and for understanding, but at the end of the day, it is one forest. This environmental commitment that we are making with the HCP is giant, and I need it to be reflected personally, but I also think as a community, it's important because there are people that are not at the table that would not understand the differences.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Scar, did you have a comment?
I did. I thought that moving to the carbon sequestration, that it seemed that in one slide we did include forest products, and in the second slide we did not include forest products once removed. It seems like that should be consistent, and we should be including in both slides. I don't know why we would choose to do it one way in one slide and a different way in the second slide, unless I was misunderstanding.
I think you're understanding correctly. It was just a matter of choice, I think.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like it makes it unclear from my perspective as to how we compare A to B, right? So we need to be apples to apples, would be super helpful as opposed to choosing one and then the other. It leads to a need to explain, and it leads to a need to, or a confusion as to which one we should be using. And I think we should be using one that includes the harvested product, because we know that that continues to sequester carbon in the long term. So I would request respectfully that we use the same one for both, and that it be that one. And then my next question was moving on to how will we use this information in the conversation of trade-offs? You know, I kind of said, God, it'd certainly be nice to have this analysis that said meets, doesn't meet, et cetera. But is there a process that's being designed that will lead us through this analysis, and the board through this analysis as metrics start to be chosen? And if so, do we know what it is yet? Is it something that we can get an overview of?
So yes, we're working with our facilitator to develop the actual list of questions. So we do want to walk through methodically in the facilitative process, make sure certain things get addressed. We'll be pointing out some of the key choice areas, and trying to get the feedback from how everybody feels about those things, what certain constraints might be around or outcome, ramifications of volatility versus even flow and how folks feel about that and their ability to accommodate and so forth, as an example. So those will be the questions that walk us through that. We'll get those to you soon. We're still just polishing them up with the facilitator. So those will be coming out soon before the board meeting. And back to the metrics piece itself, again, there's a lot that the board wants to consider that aren't really model outputs. And so where we hope to be able to get by September is just getting the key metrics there, decisions on some of those around targets for volume and so forth, the pretty much the big rocks that will help us create the implementation plans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think the other piece for then is, since we're not going to have the socioeconomic report until July, making sure that in that conversation there's a holding place as well in how those analyses are done and those cost trade-offs are talked about, that there's one that's still missing, and that you know, that while we can't know it yet, not to forget that it will be something that could sort of shift the choices at some point as well. So I guess, yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Yep.
Commissioner Fournier.
Hi, I just wanted to echo both Commissioner Scar and Commissioner Bangs. If I think I understand the point, I think that and I agree with them, is it is one forest and we're doing all of this. And it's easy to parse out if they're separate. Like the HCA is creating this much carbon and this is only creating this much carbon, but combined, we want to see the whole. I think it's important for the public when they finally hear all this, and for us too, to be talking about this. Like we are harvesting, but that is stored carbon. So it's not all bad. We're not just taking trees out of the forest. We're still storing carbon, and it's part of the big picture. So I just wanted to echo both of their comments tonight. I think it's an important thing to add to these slides.
Thank you. Chair Kelly, did you have your hand up? Oh, Brandon.
Thank you, Commissioner Magruder. I guess my question for Mike and Todd, I understand that we are still waiting on recreation. And I understand we're still waiting on a few additional details and points to be factored in to the overall modeled outcomes here. But it would appear, based off of what's in the report thus far, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like scenarios 1 and 3 would get us to greatest permanent value.
So I will just kind of give you my opinion here, because since I don't get to determine that right at the end of the day, but yes, my personal view on that is that between scenarios 1 and 3, if you're looking at that general style of management, that would definitely get you to a greatest permanent value scenario. I think scenario number 4 would require some modification probably to do that. I'm not saying it couldn't, but it would require I think a fair bit of change to that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Commissioner Bangs?
I'm just curious, and this might not be the forum to ask, it may, but so we're still waiting for the HCP to be approved. Is the timeline still the same as the last time we had the discussion?
It changes so much, I can hardly remember, but so our current timeline to ITPs is late spring to midsummer of next year.
And like, there's a lot I mean, I guess there's just a lot at the plate right now. Your budget is obviously, like ODF's budget is obviously a concern, but then I'm looking at they just closed the public comment period for potentially rescinding the definition of harm for the ESA. And so I'm just like, I feel like there's a lot of volatility right now in like HCP discussions, and I'm just curious about how that could potentially impact the HCP approval process. But then if they approve it as federal services, I mean, conservation, it has the word habitat in it, and they're talking about changing the ESA to remove the word habitat. So I guess I'm just wondering how the state's gonna navigate that.
Yeah, we're wondering how we're going to navigate that too. So there's a lot there. You know, one is if the rule actually carries forward to remove habitat modification as a factor in harm, so whether that actually happens or not. Once it happens, and it will be litigated, certainly, how long does all of that take, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty difficult for us to try to plan around that without knowing those outcomes. At the end of the day, you know, even if there were major changes to the ESA, I mean, that would cause us to really have to step back and figure out where we'd stick with our current plan, right? And if we'd had to pull anything that had to be ESA legal compliance because of how that goes, we would still have to figure out what our conservation strategy is in terms of providing GPV as well, right? And so we've got this place we're leaning on now. You know, we've got our current FMP still, and we have those concepts of desired future condition and whatnot. It's unclear how our take avoidance strategies would change because there's, you know, the potential there to actually directly kill a species with an activity that is, you know, not intended to. So it's a morass. It is a morass.
Well, I guess if we ever come to a portion where we have to go back through a draft EIS process, I would request that the counties have a person at the table to help navigate social concerns that we've seen already arise recently. I just really feel like the counties should have a voice at the table if this HCP remotely ever goes through a second draft EIS process, because I feel like if we have time and we have opportunity, we can make this a glorious plan that everyone can come to the table in agreement on. And so that's I'm advocating for the counties on that if it ever comes to pass. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got two more hands up. Did Commissioner Scar beat Chair Kelly?
No.
Oh, Chair Kelly was first? Okay.
Okay, just wanted to remind everybody, since the greatest permanent value was brought up, at the end of the day, what meets or does not meet greatest permanent value will be the board's decision, not staff. So just want to have clarity there. Sorry, Mike.
Thank you. Commissioner Scar.
Thank you. And that was really to my question as well. When the HCP came forward and the decision about whether to pass it or not, there was a recommendation that came from the state forester to the Board of Forestry. And obviously it was ultimately the Board of Forestry's decision. But will there be a similar process in metrics, et cetera, where the staff through the state forester are providing a recommendation to the Board of Forestry that will kind of be that step in between the Board of Forestry meeting where we're talking about trade-offs on all of this work, and then I assume there will be that step in between.
Yes, there will, unless we were to break with past practice. There's always been, you know, the staff recommendation and presentation of options and recommendations for the board to consider.
Perfect. Thank you. Process is me. And so I love to know like how we're going to get from where we sit today to where we're ultimately going to be. So I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you all. We have reached the end of our time period. Please, if you have questions that need to be submitted, they need to go to Brendan. Oh, yes, sir.
I'd want to go back a little bit. So previously there was a discussion at the beginning of the meeting about the memo from the state forester that has been posted to the April board materials. So it is on our public website. So it's available for public viewing.
Thank you. Questions go to Brandon. Anybody else have final words that need to be shared before we adjourn? This has been great. Good discussion. Thank you all for all of your input. And as we go down this path on our journey, it's taken a while and it's got a ways to go. And I am glad that we are all able to sit at the table, exchange ideas and thoughts, and move forward in a positive way. Thank you. Oh,
Thank
I
you.
have the gavel. I will adjourn.
Thank you, Vice Chair Magruder, for running a fabulous meeting.
Yeah, well, I'd rather be in Hawaii with you, but hey, thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Take care, everyone.